The crossing had dried weeks ago. What remained was a shallow depression in the savannah where water once moved seasonally, enough to shape the ground, not enough to leave marks once the heat returned. Grass grew shorter here, soil compacted harder, animals crossed without slowing, paths converged naturally. The lion knew this long before the man did. He had stopped near the edge of the crossing to rest, not because he was tired, but because the land looked open. Visibility mattered here. Tall grass hid too much. This place felt safer, flat, quiet, exposed. That was the mistake. The man stood upright, breathing slowly, scanning ahead. He carried no weapon, only a small pack, worn shoes, dust on his trousers. He was moving between settlements, following a line that existed mostly in his head, a shortcut learned from others, rarely used. He did not see the lion. The lion lay just beyond the crossing, body aligned with the ground, mane flattened, tail still. Its position was not concealment. It was placement. The dry crossing funneled movement. The lion had chosen it earlier, not to hunt immediately, but to hold. Lions did not need to chase when the ground already organized motion for them. The man stepped forward. His footfall sounded dull on compacted soil. The crossing did not echo. It absorbed sound. The man did not notice how quiet his own steps had become. The lion lifted its head slightly, not enough to reveal itself, just enough to confirm distance. The man continued. He was thinking about speed, not angles. He wanted to cross quickly, to minimize time in the open. He did not consider lines of retreat or how grass height changed beyond the depression. He did not know he had already entered a zone where the land offered fewer choices. The lion rose slowly. No sound, no sudden movement. It did not advance, it stood. That was enough. The man noticed movement at the edge of his vision, something vertical where nothing should be. His body reacted before his mind did. He turned sharply. They saw each other at the same moment. The distance was not close, but it was wrong. The lion did not charge, it did not crouch. It simply stood, head level, eyes fixed, body square to the crossing. The man froze. This was not fear yet. It was recalculation. Running was an option. Standing was an option. Backing away was an option. All of them felt equally uncertain because the ground no longer explained itself clearly. The lion held its position. This was not a chase. This was control. The man took a step back. The lion did nothing. That should have been information. It was not. The man turned and ran. He chose the most obvious line, straight back across the crossing, toward where he had come from. The ground there was open, hard, fast. The lion watched him go. Then it moved. Not fast, not in pursuit. It stepped forward into the crossing, occupying the space the man had just abandoned. Its presence there changed everything. The man ran harder. He felt exposed now, the open ground suddenly too wide, the grass ahead too thin to hide anything. His breath shortened. His steps became louder as panic disrupted rhythm. Behind him, the lion did not close the distance quickly. It did not need to. The man's path narrowed on its own as the crossing rose slightly toward firmer ground. His speed faltered where grass thickened unevenly. He stumbled once, caught himself, ran again. The lion followed at a measured pace. Not because it was slow, because it did not need urgency. The man had already chosen the wrong line. He had committed to speed over structure, distance over angles, flight over assessment. He had given up the only advantage he had, choice. The lion stopped again after several steps. It did not pursue further. The crossing was held. The man ran until the ground changed again, until rocks forced his pace to slow, until breath burned and sound returned to his ears. Only then did he stop. He turned. The lion was no longer visible. That was worse. The crossing lay empty again, quiet, unchanged. No tracks obvious, no sign of disturbance. The man stood trembling, not because he had been chased, but because he had realized too late that the danger was not in the lion's movement. It was in his own. The crossing had not been empty, it had been prepared, and the lion had not needed to follow him to prove that. The man did not stop running because he felt safe. He stopped because his body refused to continue at the same pace. The land ahead had changed. Low stones broke the surface. The grass thickened unevenly, catching at his legs, stealing rhythm. Breath shortened. Sound returned. His own breathing, the scrape of shoes, the dull thud of a heart pushing too hard. He slowed, then stopped completely. The first thing he did was listen. There was no pursuit sound, no rush of weight through grass, no low breath behind him. The silence that answered was complete enough to feel intentional. That silence was not relief. It was absence of information. The man turned slowly, forcing himself not to move suddenly, not to signal panic again. His eyes searched the crossing first, then the edges where grass rose higher. The crossing looked empty. That was expected. Lions did not stay visible once movement lost its meaning. Visibility was a tool, not a habit. The man stepped sideways, placing weight carefully now, trying to recover control. Each movement felt louder than it should have. His shoes disturbed loose dust, sending faint puffs into the air. He realized too late that running had erased his own reference points. He no longer knew exactly where he had come from. The crossing no longer read as a line, it read as a zone. He backed away slowly toward a cluster of rocks, choosing ground that forced him to slow, even if it meant less distance. He remembered something he had been told once by an older man. Never try to outrun what knows the land better than you do. The lion did not appear, but the man felt its presence more clearly now than when he had seen it. When the lion had stood in the crossing, everything had aligned: his sight, the ground, the options. Now, without the lion visible, alignment was gone. Every direction felt equally uncertain. He crouched briefly, lowering his silhouette, trying to reduce contrast. The grass here was not tall enough to hide him, but it broke his outline. Minutes passed. Nothing moved. The crossing remained held, not physically, but conceptually. The man understood now that returning directly was impossible. The lion did not need to block him again. The ground itself discouraged straight lines. He chose a new path. Not back, sideways. He moved along a shallow contour where the land dipped slightly, using the uneven ground to break sightlines. Each step was placed deliberately, heel to toe, minimizing sound. Sweat cooled on his skin now, turning into a different problem. Cold followed fear quickly at night. As he moved, he noticed signs of people, faint boot prints, old livestock droppings, a piece of wire caught in grass. These signs did not comfort him. They told him only that humans passed here sometimes, not that they were here now. People did not hold ground the way lions did. The man reached a low termite mound and stopped again. From here, he could see the crossing from an angle rather than head-on. The lion was there. Not where it had been before. It stood just off the depression now, partially in taller grass, body angled differently. It was not watching him directly, it was watching the crossing. The lion had repositioned. That confirmed everything. The man did not move. He understood now that the lion was not interested in him specifically, not yet. It was interested in control of movement. Anything crossing that line would matter. The man was now outside the system. That was safer. He stayed still for a long time, long enough for his breathing to slow, long enough for panic to give way to calculation. He realized that if he had not run immediately, if he had backed away slowly, kept the lion in view, the outcome would already have been different. Running had taught the ground something. It had taught it where he would not go again. The lion eventually lay down again, its body lowering until grass hid most of it. Only the head remained visible. Then even that disappeared. The crossing returned to looking empty. The man did not test it. Instead, he waited until the night shifted further, until insects resumed sound and the land regained some texture. Only then did he move again, angling away, choosing broken ground, slow routes, anything that did not look efficient. He would walk much farther now, but he would stay alive. The lesson settled deeply. The danger had not been the lion's speed, it had been the man's decision to simplify. Straight lines belonged to animals that could afford them. The man moved on under the stars, carrying with him a new understanding of crossings, not as places to pass through quickly, but as places already claimed by those who knew how to wait. Hado. Stones regained edges. Distance returned. The man had not slept. He had walked until his legs shook, then stopped only when exhaustion forced him to. He chose a shallow rise with broken ground, where nothing moved easily and sightlines were uneven. He sat with his back to a rock and waited for dawn. When light finally arrived, the world looked ordinary again. That was the most unsettling part. Birds resumed calling. Insects lifted from the grass. The savannah stretched wide and calm as if nothing had happened. From where he stood, the dry crossing was barely visible, a slight dip, nothing more. If he had arrived now, in daylight, he would have crossed without hesitation. The man stood carefully and stretched stiff legs. Every muscle ached, not from injury, but from the tension of holding control too long. He scanned the land again, this time not for the lion itself, but for signs. There were tracks, not fresh enough to be obvious at night, clear enough now. The lion's prints crossed the depression at an angle, not straight through. They did not follow the most compacted line, they followed where movement would naturally funnel. The man walked closer, slowly, alert, and stopped well short of the crossing. He did not step into it. From this distance, the pattern became clear. The lion had not been waiting in the crossing, it had been waiting for it. Paths converged there, antelope, zebra, cattle, people. The soil was harder, grass shorter, sound different. The crossing simplified decisions for anything moving through it. The lion had placed itself where choice narrowed. The man saw his own tracks now. They were chaotic. Where he had run, the prints were deeper, uneven, spread wider as his stride broke down. He had crossed the lion's field of control exactly the way prey did. Fast, straight, committed. He felt a cold realization settle. The lion had not reacted to him. It had allowed him to react to the ground. Voices reached him from farther down the slope. People. 2 men, walking with sticks, moving cattle toward grazing ground. They saw him and stopped, surprised. One raised a hand. They spoke cautiously at first, then more quickly as he answered. He told them what had happened, not dramatically, not in full detail. Just enough. They listened without interrupting. One of them nodded slowly. "That crossing," he said. "We avoid it at night." The man looked at him sharply. "Why?" The older man gestured with his chin. "Because lions hold places, not areas. Places." They walked closer together, staying on broken ground. The herders did not approach the crossing directly. They circled it wide, keeping cattle well away. One of them pointed at the tracks. "You ran," he said, not accusingly, just stating fact. The man nodded. "That is why it followed," the younger one said. "It didn't follow," the older man corrected. "It stayed." They moved on after a while, driving cattle away from the depression. The man watched them go, noticing how they chose their lines. Never straight, never fast, always with options. He stood alone again. This time, the crossing did not look empty. It looked occupied, even without the lion present. The man turned away and continued his journey, choosing a longer route, one that curved with the land instead of cutting through it. He carried no new scars, no story of heroism, only a correction. The lesson was complete. The danger had not been sudden. It had not been violent. It had not required speed. It had required only one wrong assumption, that open ground meant safe ground. The lion had held the crossing not with force, but with understanding, and the man, by running, had proven that the lion was right to wait. By the time the sun rose fully, the savannah looked unchanged. But one man moved through it differently now, and one crossing remained exactly what it had always been. Not a path to pass through, but a decision already made by something that knew how to stand still. The man did not speak about the crossing again that day. He walked with the herders for a time, then separated from them without ceremony, following a livestock trail that bent wide around the depression. The sun climbed, heat returned, and with it the illusion that danger belonged to the night alone. But the crossing stayed with him, not as fear, as structure. When he stopped to drink, he thought about where he stood in relation to low ground. When he rested, he chose places where movement would be visible from more than one direction. Without noticing it at first, he began to move the way the herders did, never committing to a single line unless he could see how it ended. By midday, he reached a cluster of huts near a seasonal water point. People sat in the shade, mending tools, watching goats pick at dry grass. Someone offered him water. Someone else asked where he had come from. He mentioned the crossing. Conversation paused, not dramatically, not with alarm, with recognition. An older woman nodded once. "Yes," she said, "that place stays quiet." Another man added, "We lost a calf there once, not taken, just turned around." No one described an attack. No one raised their voice. They spoke about the crossing the way people spoke about steep banks or unstable wells, not as threats, but as conditions. The man listened. He learned that paths had shifted over the years. Where people walked once, they no longer did. Where cattle used to cross freely, they were now guided elsewhere. The crossing remained in maps drawn by memory, not ink. Children were told not to run there, not because of lions, because running made the ground decide for you. That phrase stayed with him. That evening, as the heat faded again, he climbed a low rise overlooking the savannah. From there, the crossing was barely visible, a slight dip, a change in grass colour, nothing more. No lion stood there, no movement marked the place, still nothing crossed it. Antelopes skirted wide, birds lifted and settled elsewhere. Even wind seemed to thin as it passed over the depression, breaking differently against the land. The crossing was held, not by presence, by expectation. The man understood now that the lion did not need to return every night. Its use of the place had already altered movement. Once enough animals learned where danger could be, the place stopped needing constant reinforcement. That was the lion's real efficiency. It did not patrol territory, it shaped decisions. As darkness returned, the man chose a route that kept him on higher, broken ground. He moved slower, but he slept. Far away, unseen, the lion returned to the crossing. Not urgently, not every night, only when it needed to. The ground still offered what it always had: clarity, funneling, control. The lion lay down, facing a direction where nothing moved anymore. It waited. Because the best places did not need defending. They only needed to be understood. And once a place taught enough beings how to move around it, it stopped being dangerous in the obvious way. It became permanent. The man never crossed there again. Years later, he would still remember the moment when the lion stood and did nothing, and how everything after that had been decided by his own feet. The crossing remained, dry, quiet, empty, held not by teeth or claws, but by a shared recognition written into movement itself. That was how the savannah kept its balance. Not through constant violence, but through places that taught everyone once and were never tested the same way again. Nothing happened at the crossing for a long time. That was the final state. Days passed, then weeks. Grass shifted slightly with wind and heat. Hoof marks appeared at the margins and vanished again. Insects moved freely. Birds landed and lifted without concern. But no one crossed the depression directly. Not because a lion was always there, because it did not need to be. The lion returned occasionally, never on a schedule. Sometimes it lay near the crossing at dusk, sometimes only passed nearby at night, sometimes ignored the place entirely. The ground did not require reinforcement. Movement patterns had already changed. The crossing no longer invited testing. Antelope altered routes subtly, choosing firmer rises even when that meant longer travel. Zebra slowed near the depression and angled away without hesitation. Cattle, guided by human hands, were kept wide from the low ground. No panic, no urgency, just correction. The man returned to the region once, months later, travelling with others. He recognized the crossing immediately, not by sight, but by the way conversation bent around it. Someone mentioned a shortcut and was gently corrected. Someone else suggested passing through low ground and was told, quietly, not there. He did not explain why. He did not need to. The crossing had become knowledge rather than experience. That was the final transformation. Danger that required memory became safer than danger that required constant force. The lion had not killed at the crossing since that night. It had not needed to. Its presence had done its work. The man stood at a distance again, this time in daylight, surrounded by people and movement. The depression looked harmless, flat, dry, almost inviting. He felt no fear, only clarity. He understood now that the crossing had never been empty. It had been active in a different way, organizing movement, simplifying decisions for those who did not question it, punishing straightness rather than slowness. He turned away with the others and walked the longer path without complaint. Far away, unseen, the lion rose from shade and moved on to hunt elsewhere. It did not look back. The crossing did not belong to it anymore. It belonged to the pattern. This was how balance settled, not through dramatic endings, not through visible threat, but through the quiet agreement between land, animals, and people about where movement should no longer go. Nothing happened there anymore, and that was the proof that everything had already happened once, correctly. The crossing remained dry, quiet, unchanged, not as a trap, not as a battlefield, but as a rule written into the savannah, understood without being spoken, followed without being enforced. The lion did not need to be remembered, only the line did, and as long as no one chose it again, the place would remain exactly what it had become. A space where danger had finished its work and no longer needed to appear at all.